Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome filmmaker and researcher KJ Ozborne. KJ works to expose the evil systems of control used to manipulate and steer humanity, from the music industry, movies and TV, to social media, transhuman agendas, and occult symbolism. His YouTube channel is The Scariest Movie Ever. KJ, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to do this. I appreciate this.
Yeah,
you cover some very, very fascinating things. And over the years, I've noticed major changes to our society. You know, the normalization of occult symbolism, transhumanism, and even the attempted normalization of things like pedophilia. You know, it's become a very terrifying reality. And it seems that people are getting more desensitized to this. And some even embrace some of these movements.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I'd like to start off with what opened your eyes to some of these things and got you started on your research.
Well, I guess, from the very beginning, like as a little boy, I was raised on horror films and science fiction. My dad's really into that stuff, and he still is to this day. And so I was raised with that. I was also raised in religion. I was raised in a church. So I just kind of mixed the two, I guess. When I was a little kid, I was just talking to someone about this earlier, but as a little kid, I saw like the Hat Man is the only kind of paranormal experience I've had, but I saw the Shadow Man, and I used to tell my parents it was a cowboy that was coming into the room at night. But so it goes back to some of that stuff. I've always been real open to supernatural, paranormal type stuff. Very open-minded with the idea of God and everything. Of course, I'm a follower of Christ and all this. But even with that, I don't push that a whole lot to the forefront on the channel because I'm not trying to create an echo chamber. I find that with a lot of things, a lot of subjects, even like flat Earth, stuff like this. They create an echo chamber. It's just a bunch of people repeating the same thing over and over. So I have a different approach to that as well. But the point is, so it started back then. I eventually went to film school to write horror and science fiction films and make movies. And I got my degree in screenwriting with a minor in editing. And from there, I moved to New York City for a while. And I worked with Fangoria, which started with horror magazines. But when I was there, I was working on their website. And, so it was all horror type related stuff. And from there, I moved to Los Angeles. And I really tried to get in the industry. So I was out there for, like 5-ish years or so. And, I worked in television production for many years. I was working, again, just production level type stuff, running and getting coffee and all this. And then I worked my way up to where I would stay the night with the contestants on reality shows to make sure they didn't leave or do anything crazy. And, so it just that was a thing. And the whole time I had probably 10 scripts, different movie ideas, and also television shows. And I eventually got an agent, and she would help me shop this stuff. So I, went to pretty much most of the big companies you can think of. I even had a TV series at NBC for a while, but it never got picked up or optioned or anything. So I had some close calls, and near the end, I was working on something for Adult Swim. I was working with an animator, and they were going to start it on Adult Swim. And, even that was just some weird stuff I was coming up with and crazy stuff. But eventually I woke up out in Los Angeles. I was moving at one point to a different part of the city, and I was working a graveyard shift at the time. And I went and stayed with my cousin in Chinatown for a while. And he was in and out a lot. He was a musician, so he wasn't always home. So I had a lot of spare time on my hands. And up to that point, I had never really looked into social media. I didn't have a Facebook or anything like that, or a YouTube channel. And I just stumbled on YouTube, and I wound up watching a video about the Bohemian Grove. It's that famous footage from Alex Jones whenever he claimed to have, well, he was obviously in there, but when he shot that footage inside Bohemian Grove. And, go ahead.
Well, I just said, right. I was agreeing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, man. So I saw that, and then at that point, I'd always been open-minded to conspiracies and stuff. A lot of my TV shows and movies, it turns out, were all conspiratorial. I'd had a movie about the Antichrist. I had a TV series about a secret agent that dealt with paranormal type stuff. You know, we've seen the same trope, you know, but I wrote one of those. But in this one, I thought it was cool because he worked with Sasquatches. I know it sounds funny, but at one point you find out the Sasquatches were actually an Indian tribe that were cursed by another tribe to be beasts and immortal. So they just live in these huge cavernous systems, and the way you pay them is with books. They love knowledge. So you can go to them and they can actually help you out with stuff. It's kind of a crazy thing. So as that was the screenplay, that was that stuff, like I said. So I found that video, and up to that point, though, even though I'd been open to these kind of things, I was also very right-leaning. I was pretty hardcore conservative because I'm also a military veteran. I was in the U.S. Coast Guard for 8 years at one point. So that kind of even conditioned me more and more to be more right-leaning. So everything changed, though, man, when I saw that footage. Something broke inside me. It really affected me, and I just couldn't believe it. So I've always been the type of person that, again, I'm into prayer and all this, and I prayed, and I just said, you know, God, I want to know it all. You know, I want to see everything. You know, show me I didn't even know what subjects were out there. I was like, I really want to just see it all. I want to learn all this, because at that point I was working a security job. It's the last job I had in Los Angeles before I left, because I kind of got disenfranchised with the system I was working in, the television shows, even with the script stuff. I was still shopping scripts, but I just wasn't making that much money working in shows. And plus, it's one show ends, there's no guarantee you get another one. So it's a hard life, man. So I was kind of just almost to the point I was out of it, really almost given up the dream of writing these kind of scripts and movies. And then this fell right into my lap, because what I realized is that this world really is a horror and science fiction film. It's an actual horror science fiction movie. And I get to make my movies now whenever I want. I've been doing it off and on YouTube for 12 years now. So I get to make little videos about these things that are real, you know, and still just as crazy as anything ever imagined, because those things mirror each other a lot anyway. So I went down a heavy rabbit hole, man, for, you know, like about a month on YouTube. And this is back in the day. It was just, YouTube was the Wild West back then. It was wonderful. You could find everything. So I was just looking into everything. I read a book from Bill Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse, and just kind of started getting into all of it. But anyway, around that time, it's when I started using my minor in editing. So I started a website called Rigged Reality, and I was posting other people's material, you know, radio shows from Bill Cooper, stuff from Alex Jones, you know, all the early stuff, you know. So I was doing that, and then so I did that for a little while, did the website, posting other people's stuff. And then at one point I wanted to do something myself, you know, so I finally realized that, you know, it's time to, you know, try my hand at this. So I just kept researching, and I started getting into, even with symbolism and all that, there were 3 channels that aren't even around really anymore that don't do anything, but they were really big into exposing symbols. There were some great series. One's called The Arrivals. It's kind of an Islamic look at the Antichrist. Still just a lot of wonderful information, and that's very deep, very interesting. So that was one of the things I cut my teeth on. And website or YouTube channels like Dr. Freemason Noriega was one of them, and Farhan K501 was one of the biggest. He did a lot of the early Hollywood exposed stuff. He's the, you know, the first guy to have done a lot of this, like the Disney stuff and everything else with the symbolism. He was one of the first. So I was getting in around 2009 on this stuff and learning. And, you know, I started uploading, I guess it was 2011. But so in that time I was learning, and that's when I decided to make my movie. So I made a film called The Scariest Movie Ever Made, which was just a massive project. It's about a 2-hour-long movie. And since then it's earned its own kind of, I guess, cult status, you know, because it's been up and down all over the place. It's in a couple places now. It's been there for a few years. So YouTube, a couple people have it up on YouTube now. I have it over on Vimeo, and then I've seen other people posting it other places. So you can still find it. But that was the very first thing I really did for myself and to do for other people. And it was like 11 or 12 years ago now. And so I made that. Oh, here's something funny. I thought, here's something I can share with you. Just thinking of the movie, man, and hope you don't mind. I feel like I'm just rambling on. I hope that's okay.
Man, of course, this is great. Okay,
cool. So I told you I had the security job, and I worked graveyard. So I was basically driving around all night, and I was spying on the guards. I had to make sure my guards were awake and stuff, right? So And I had this guard up in Pasadena at a gated apartment complex. Pasadena is a beautiful city. It's a very expensive complex. And I really liked this guy. His name was Randy, and he was ex-MS-13. It's a long time ago. He was ex-MS-13 gang member, had everything, tattoos on his fingertips, on his neck, before the neck thing was popular. A lot of people do it now. I mean, he had the real gangster stuff, man, all over him. But he had, found Christ, found God. He got married, had a couple of niños, and was really getting his life together. And I really trusted him, and I really liked him. And the reason I liked him so much is because he was really into conspiracies and stuff like this too. So he and I would just sit there forever, man, just talking about stuff. So I didn't even tell him I was making this movie. I told him I'd been working on a project. He had no idea what it was. So one night when I had to go up there and visit, I drove up, knocked on the door. I said, hey, and this is the first copy of the scariest movie I ever made. The first copy was in my hand. I still have it on my computer. And I said, man, this is what I've been working on. And I handed it to him. I said, man, please check this out and let me know if it's any good or just what you think. But it's some of the stuff we talk about and a bunch of other stuff I've been finding. So he's like, all right, sure. So I left. And of course, that had so many accounts to keep track of back then that I didn't see him for probably another couple weeks. And I called him that night and said, I'm coming out to see you. He said, all right, cool. So I was driving up. He kind of knew when I was going to be there, because when I got there, I knocked on the door and he said, come on in. And I opened the door to his guard shack, or his little booth. And he had his back to me. And he slowly turned around. And when he turned around facing me, he had his hands cupped together around his waist, and he was holding about 15 copies of the scariest movie ever made. And he said, bro, people need to see this shit. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. I go, man, cool, thanks. So he's like, I'm going to give it to my friends, to my church. I was like, all right, sweet, man. So that's kind of how it started. And then, it's been out there, and I'm still real proud of it. And then that's what it was. So then I guess after a few more years of just running the website and posting other people's stuff, I had eventually left LA to move to Austin, Texas, where I ultimately became a bounty hunter. And that's a whole other story itself. And I have a bit of a military law enforcement background. And I'd also had a detective license at one point on the East Coast. I've got a crazy history.
Man.
I moved to Austin, and I was doing door-to-door sales, selling oil changes and stuff for like 6 months to start off. And that's when I was really starting to get into videos, because one day I was sitting at my computer and I saw this ad for a Steven Spielberg animated movie called Rin Tin Tin, I think it is. And it's about a dog and a boy. And on the cover of it, the boy and the captain are doing the perfect Freemason handshake. So I picked up my phone and I didn't even think about it. Like, well, I could just record this. So I pressed record, pointed at my computer and said, Freemason handshake, Spielberg, Rin Tin Tin. And that was it. And it's still the first video on my channel. It's only like 40 seconds long. So I put that up, and then that opened up a whole new world to me. Then I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I can that's how I can make movies, There wasn't a lot of great screen recording stuff and all that fancy stuff back then, and I had a big editing program, but it was on a computer that had crashed. So I just had nothing. I just had a little computer. So if you go back to a lot of my earlier videos, you'll see that I'm literally putting my phone, stacking it on books, lining it up perfectly with a computer screen, and just clicking the bookmarks on the computer screen as I explain things. That was the way I did videos for like years. Don't ask me why. I never upgraded, but yeah, and it's still like that. And some of those have got 1 million views, hundreds of thousands of views. That, again, back when YouTube wasn't screwing with us. They're totally jacking my channel right now the best they can. But
oh yeah, man,
you feel it too? All over. It's all over. It's happening to a lot of people. But so yeah, man. So it opened up a whole new world. I started making videos, and then that's where we are now, man. It's like it became, I guess, around 2014, up to like 2016. It was fantastic. I mean, I was earning a really decent living doing it, and I'd never got into it for the money. I did it for like 3 years before I was even offered the program, right? So, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was so decent. I was so feeling all right about it that I left the country. I don't know if you knew, but I moved down to Costa Rica. I just came back to America about 3 years ago. So I moved down to Costa Rica for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah, man. I lived out there for a couple of years. two of the most productive years of my channel, probably. I had a lot of great stuff, I feel, and a lot of stuff I'm proud of. You know, it's like every video over 100,000 views within a couple days. Nowadays, it's like, you know, after a week, I'm not even breaking 100,000 on there. It's crazy, you know, but the channel's twice as big.
Right.
But
Major suppression going on right now.
yeah, it's just, I keep saying it. I just need to do it, but I keep saying I'm going to start moving stuff over to BitChute just for safekeeping. So I need to do that soon. But so yeah, man.
So yeah, and I thought, you know, a good place to start when it comes to talking about some of these just twisted agendas is what they do with the media, TV, music, and now social media, one of their more favorite tools to use. But I thought we could maybe break down each of those categories and tell us what you see going on now. So let's start with movies and TV.
Well, even with movies and TV, in fact, a video I'm working on now has to do with Spider-Man Far From Home. I could take a Masonic apron, which has everything from the beehive to the falling star and everything else in between, the checkerboard floor and all. I take a Masonic apron, I can set it right there next to the movie, and I can show you throughout the entire film how all this stuff's framed up with Masonic symbolism. And it comes in a couple different forms when we're looking at movies, movies and TV shows. Most people probably understand it's programming. They call it a TV program, right, for a reason. And this started back in the 50s. So we haven't even had this technology for that long, if you think about it. I mean, it's still kind of within the first generation-ish, maybe, but it's still, you know, it's been, 50, 60, almost 70 years? That's it. I mean, that's a generation. So, you know, it's still relatively new. And of course, as time's gone on, it's become much more powerful. But there's a lot of, you know, so-called programming back then in the beginning as well. A lot of it I don't think is obvious because a lot of really good stuff came through, you know, sweet stuff, wholesome stuff. I mean, there was a time where, you know, you could learn nice life lessons from some television shows. You know, it used to be really sweet and nice. And of course, that's all been completely inverted. You know, there's nothing like that anymore. So it's a program. It's a program mechanism. I've shown in some videos as well that even some of the newest black screen TVs, the big flat screen TVs, to me, they resemble scrying mirrors. So I've made videos and explained some of this where these are literally a modern day scrying mirror. Witches for centuries have used the black mirror, right, to speak into, do incantations and talk to beings on the other side, right, to summon demons and stuff. So isn't it interesting that now pretty much millions of people all around the world have these massive scrying mirrors in their living rooms and in their bedrooms, and they're constantly being funneled like this literal other dimension of reality, you know, and but we can't tell the difference, you know, we get sucked into this. They did some experiments many years ago. I can't remember what the experiment was called, but in this particular one, it was two 10-year-old boys, and they put them in separate rooms, and they put electrodes all over their head. And one of them was staring at a television show, and the other one was staring at a brick wall. And they did this for 30 minutes or so. And of course, when it came back, that's when they started learning more about alpha and beta waves. You've ever heard about that? So once you flick on the TV, you literally zone out a bit. Whether no matter you're awake eating chips, that's fine, but there's a part of your brain that's turned off and is receiving. So that's how that works. So it's very interesting. And so with that kind of modern day witchcraft in our homes, these massive scrying mirrors, this is why a lot of times I go off a bit more on the spiritual tip with things, because there has to be, for me, there had to be another answer. There had to be an answer to this. I don't want to just be tumbling through a rabbit hole my whole life and freaking out, because a lot of people do that, you know. I mean, you tumble down that rabbit hole, and if you don't have something to hold on to, whatever it is, but if you don't have something solid that you can call a truth and the truth, you're in trouble, you know, because right now things are swirling and getting insane, as you said, with some of the agendas we're seeing coming out right now. I mean, we literally have little 10 and 11-year-old boys, you know, dressing up as girls. And there's videos of some of these boys at gay clubs where there's, you know, full-grown men tossing dollar bills at them. Now, I'm not trying to offend your audience, of course, that might be homosexual. It's not that, but it's obviously being played out a lot right now in our culture. Every movie, TV show you watch, it's basically 98% representation of a population that's under 4%. And this is what we see in everything. And a lot of it in a larger way, it's not even about the gay thing or the straight thing, I feel, when it comes to this agenda. It's about a hatred for humanity and also depopulation. All right. It manifests in a depopulation, this hatred for humanity. I know I'm rambling a bit.
Oh, I agree with you 100% about it's not about, a gay or straight thing. It's about humanity. It's about making us less of what it is to be human. And I believe that there's a possible end game of a merger of, man and technology and getting rid of almost everything that it is to be a human being.
Yeah, sure. That's a huge part of the agenda, of course. I did a video recently called Elon Musk and the Antichrist, and I looked at his Neuralink company. Did you know he had this company called Neuralink?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big one. So anyway, I dove heavy into that in that video, but it's also connected, of course, to the microchip system and all this stuff as well. We see this massive rise in virtual reality. We see this playing out socially in a lot of really strange ways as well with what's happening. With our world, again, everything being flipped upside down, even in relationships and love. We talk about social media and all this, but even when you look at that, we're seeing the rise of the incel culture, which I'm fascinated with. I've been piecing, I'm always working on something. It takes me a while to do a video sometimes, like a week or so sometimes, but I'm always working on 4 or 5 things, and one of them has to do with incel culture and how many of them have been committing mass murders and stuff like this. And what their history is and what their mindset is. But more importantly, it's another reflection of it's the pendulum swinging, because on one side we've got this third wave feminism. First wave feminism was about women's rights. Second wave was about equal rights, and third wave is about no rights for men, basically. That's kind of how I see it. So, or well, you know what I mean. I mean, women over men, if you will. And we see that, there's no apology for that because it's so obvious. And if you go deeper into that, though, I see this as the mother goddess worship. I see this as a rise in mother goddess power and a rise in mother goddess worship. I've detailed in videos the rise of the witches. There's even stories out there about how millennials are becoming witches. They're turning away from traditional religions and they're literally becoming witches. But they've been conditioned, remember the program, for many years. Think of Harry Potter. Who didn't grow up on Harry Potter thinking sorcery is awesome and I want to do spells? You know what I mean? Meanwhile, he's carrying the lightning bolt of the devil right there on his forehead. The devil really is in the details. And that's where a lot of that symbolism is that I'm talking about. Even with Spider-Man, another thing, when you talk about predictive programming, we find things in movies and TV shows that happens in our reality, next thing you know. So in Spider-Man, it's almost like it reminds me of a Project Bluebeam predictive programming, not to spoil too much for anybody, but throughout the movie, there's this massive monster destroying cities and all this, and they find out later it's a bunch of drones projecting together all of this imagery. When he hits a building, they have explosions there and they'll blow it up. So they just create this show for the world so everyone will fall to their knees and worship this guy. And it's like, wow. That's interesting because people have been talking about that for a long time, about a real possibility in our world today. Seeing something like that now with the kind of technology they have. Again, Project Bluebeam, if people don't know about that, they could project a 500-foot tall Jesus in the sky. I wonder how that would affect people. But they started talking about doing it in Arab countries. And out there, they were going to be broadcasting all kinds of crazy stuff too. So it's just something to think about, but you can always veer me back on a course if you like, but I know
I wanted to get back to the symbolism that they use. They don't even try and hide it anymore in movies and TV shows now. It's becoming more abundant. Do you think it's a form of indoctrination? They're trying to get us used to this for something that they'll be rolling out or something that they know will be occurring in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
When it comes to symbols, there's a couple of old theosophists named Alice and Foster Bailey who I've studied in the past to know my enemy, right? But I've studied them, and even when they talk about these symbols that we see in everything, it's all about intention with symbols. There's an intention behind that symbol. A lot of this now, to me, is more spiritual in nature as well, because we do see it in everything now. We do see it manifesting quicker. I don't even show everything in my videos that I could show because almost frame for frame in a lot of these movies, they have things set up always in the background that have to do with sun worship, which goes back to Lucifer, or any of these Masonic symbols, or what we call Illuminati symbols. Sometimes it gets deeper. You'll see representations of Mithra or Isis and things like this all over the place. Again, back to the rise of Mother Goddess worship. I almost feel as if we're living at a time where all of the ancient gods, if you will, are returning for the apocalypse in a way. I've shown examples of this as well in things that they found, relics and all that. They're constantly finding all these things that pertain to ancient gods lately. And we also see that with superhero culture. If you talk about symbolism, one of the most obvious symbols, of course, is the all-seeing eye on your dollar bill, but it's hidden in plain sight. Again, people go, that's on your money, dude. You're being dumb. Like people just don't, you know what I'm saying? A lot of them just, it's hidden in plain sight. They don't get it.
Yeah.
But it's right there. They found this, they found a pyramid with 13 bricks, 13 levels in it with an all-seeing eye at the top in Ecuador that dates back thousands of years. And when it's shown in the dark with a dark light on it, it glows in the dark. And this thing goes back forever. And they don't understand how this works. You can look it up, all-seeing eye, pyramid found Ecuador or something, okay? So this symbol's been around since the beginning. It is the symbol of the beast system. You can trace back I believe that what it is, it's the multiple secret societies working together. So I'll stay on the symbols for now, though. I'll give you some more examples. So there's intention. What's the intention behind the symbol? There's different levels of this. Like I watched the new Child's Play movie recently, the Chucky movie. I'm not even going to do a video on it, but the stuff can get boring, honestly, if you're just like, oh, look, an Illuminati symbol, because we've seen that played out. Remember, we've seen that culture rise on YouTube where it was huge, and then now so many of those people just gave up, or they had their channels taken away, or they, demonetized. So we saw it rise, we saw it fall. There's still some of us clinging on, but even a lot of them that rose and fall weren't there in the beginning, and a lot of them came in as kind of Johnny-come-latelys, and I think benefited greatly from, that big push in conspiracies there for a few years. So I don't believe they were all real anyway. That's just me. So anyway, Chucky, this new Chucky movie. Again, man, frame by frame I could go through. They have the pentagram in his bedroom, a little star by his light. It's always framed up right there with him next to the pentagram. He's drawing a big painting of a massive dragon. There's 2 masks sitting on his wall that have demon horns on them. I mean, just little things like this. There's a lot of scenes where right behind the shoulder of an actor, there's a pyramid with a light on top of it, like they'll help frame it up perfectly. And this is what they do. I've done some deep breakdowns on these in some other movies in the past. I put those up, I think, over on the website, but it's kind of what I get into on most of my videos, and I can show people enough and say, there's also a system with it, okay? So what are the symbols? I'll say this. You'll get 666 symbolism a lot of the time, of course. The upside down crosses, pyramid and sun is prevalent in all kinds of things. That goes back to the Lucifer worship, ultimately. So you'll have lots of sun symbolism as well. Gosh, what else? I'm trying to think of just the basic like so-called, the circle over the eye, with the 666, the one hand over an eye. Again, these are just some of them, and most people are about this. And this stuff has been around for a long time. I mean, even tracing back masonry, you can go all the way back to Nimrod, all right? And Manly P. Hall in Secret Teachings of the Ages wrote that he believed that Nimrod was one of the fallen angels himself. So we see this, and we see that kind of demonic intelligence, if you will, which they have, that wicked intelligence, but we see that carrying on from generation to generation. We've seen other New World orders being built up and destroyed throughout history, if you will. You see, so everything works in cycles. So we've seen these same little secret societies running around, hiding in plain sight, putting their symbols out, for all to see. Another reason why is it's called lesser magic. It causes the public to become a part of the spell, okay? So sometimes there's a movie that'll have predictive programming. It'll be filled with symbolism. I believe the intention, whether that was placed in by somebody's hands on purpose, and sometimes that is the case, I believe, or whether it was something spiritual working through these creatives which I believe is the other case, right? So again, that makes the case for not everybody in Hollywood is putting on black cloaks and sacrificing goats. You know what I mean? I worked out there. There's a lot of really cool people, a lot of good people. I was asked to be a Mason out there by 2 different producers. I mentioned this years ago as well. That's one of the things that first started waking me up too. That's before the movie, before the awakening. So even that, I was like, I don't really know much about it, but it seems weird. But, I knew some of these guys that were Masons out there in Hollywood. They didn't tell me deep secrets or anything like that, but I learned all that on my own, So the symbols. So there's lesser magic, we become a part of that spell. Like with 9/11, when 9/11, before 9/11, there was tons of symbolism in movies and TV shows. I mean, just filled with 9/11 symbolism. And some of that is in my movie, The Scariest Movie Ever Made. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. If you
Yes.
folks haven't, then please y'all go look it up and you'll see what I mean. So that's another example. And you saw it in a lot of movies like Matrix, which another one had a lot of so-called Illuminati symbolism in it as well. So, or I call them symbols of the beast system. It's a consciousness. I see it as a demonic consciousness. It's worked in, these secrets have been hidden for years, by the illuminated ones, different secret societies working together. And now we're at a time, I believe it's kind of an apocalypse, if you will. Like this is the apocalypse where I believe everything's being revealed. Everything's coming out. I'm not saying the end of the world's tomorrow because nobody knows. I never lived my life like that either. Oh, it's the end. We're going to die. It's like, I'm aware of these things. You stay aware, but you got to live, because I've seen so many doomsdays come and go in my 12 years. It's not even funny. So there's that. But we are living in a time where this stuff is manifesting really heavy. We're seeing it in all kinds of stuff. And it's just absolutely, bonkers. But the beauty is once you see it and you understand what it is, I believe that's a part of what my job is in this world, is to help break that spell, is once you understand these symbols are there for a reason. There's an intention behind this, and it's not for your well-being. Now you can see the spirit that's working through these films and TV shows, these specific ones that you see all these things happen in. There also has to be confirmations, because sometimes a pyramid's just a pyramid. Sometimes, right? It's just sometimes the sun's just the sun.
Right.
But you'll know when you start learning and watching these things, and all of a sudden you'll see like multiple in movies and multiple in these TV shows connected with the plot of the movie or TV show. A lot of times lately, I see a lot of movies where the evil wins. There's so many movies about demons lately and possession, but it's so interesting how in the end, evil always wins. The person stays possessed or it jumps into another person. The priest tries to stop it and he gets his ass kicked and gets his throat slit. I mean, seriously, that's the stuff. These are the messages we get in a lot of this stuff, that evil will win and beat you. Meanwhile, you've got these symbols working on your subconscious mind with whatever intention it has on it,
Right. And earlier you had mentioned the old gods. Now, is that what these elites are answering to and worshiping, these old ancient gods, say, that have been mentioned throughout time, throughout the Sumerian mythos, the Egyptian mythos? Is that who they are so-called worshiping and answering to? Or is it just a collection of other occult practices?
I think so. There's a video YouTube's yanked so many of my videos, they'll block them worldwide, right? But I put them up over on my website. But I had one up. I can't even remember what it was called. Oh, I think it was called The Illuminati's Real Religion Revealed or something. But and it's hard to find this clip now. Luckily, I got a copy of it and I put it up, like I said, on my site. But and this was from years ago, like 5 or 6 years ago. I first put this one up. But it was an interview. It was on an actual so-called conspiracy show that was running on Sci-Fi Channel, and those never can get that deep. But I can't remember what it's called, Debunked or something or whatever. But anyway, it was a guy that acted like he took I take a logical approach to conspiracies, and of course just had no clue about the things people like us know about, or he did, and he just wasn't allowed to talk about it. But he did do some things right, and one of them is he was in Washington D.C. and he met with this limo driver that had been a limo driver for like the Rockefellers and some of the biggest, most elite names in politics. And he said, and I can't remember who he was driving that night, I don't even remember if it mattered, but out of his own mouth he said that these people that run the biggest corporations in the world, along with the biggest names in politics and things like this, he said there's a group of these people that go to these meetings and they believe that they're literally talking to what they call the Council of Nine. And the Council of Nine is essentially fallen angels. So they're communing with fallen angels, doing some kind of rituals and stuff he was talking about. Good luck finding that clip anywhere nowadays. But I mean, and just the way it was on the show now, again, is somebody just BSing? Maybe. But I mean, this guy checked out. You know, he really had a history with being a limo driver for all these huge people. And it'd been years ago, and he'd gotten out and doing his own thing, I guess, and just it's something that ate away at him forever, he said. You know, he just wanted to kind of put it out there. He didn't know what it meant. I thought that was interesting. It lines up with a lot of other things, as you said, throughout history. We see a lot of this. Even I just saw something recently on Hitler connected with Antarctica, and of course the whole idea of the underground bases out there. But it got into some of the witchcraft and stuff he was into, and it's the same thing. Like he had mediums that were contacting celestial beings, they were calling it, you know, and they would give him advice on things about where to place soldiers and all this other stuff. Yeah. So, you know, so there's always these crazy ass world leaders communicating with, you know, they may think they're aliens. I get into a lot of that fake alien stuff too, but they think they're, you know, talking to the Pleiadians or whatever the crap it is. But, you know, the alien story, it just keeps changing though as time goes on. You know, as space travel became more advanced, the story started changing. In the beginning, they were all coming from Mars and the moon. That's why in the 50s, you had all these TV shows, again, programming us. Again, it's all Mars and the moon, Mars and the moon. Well, then, many years later, you know, we actually send ships out there and start seeing things on satellites and getting imagery. And, well, now the story is they're coming from, like, Orion, you know, or, you know, the Pleiades and stuff like this. But it's the same ancient demonic energy that's been there forever. These are disemboweled spirits of the fallen ones, I believe. And in some cases, they could be the fallen ones themselves. But I've shown a lot of examples of that specific kind of UFO. I know I'm tracking off a bit. Anything else on the symbols?
That kind of brings me to, is that what you think they're preparing us for something with all this, you know, UFO stuff going on in the news and the mainstream media? Do you think they may be preparing us for either some sort of like Project Bluebeam, like you said earlier, or even contact with entities not of this world?
I tend to think, again, you know, we can only speculate. You know what I mean? I'm not some kind of a guy that makes prophecies here or anything, but
right.
You know, I get my glimpses of stuff, and man, I could be a combination of the two, but I do believe in real contact as well. There's a being called Maitreya. Have you heard of Maitreya?
Yes, I've heard him spoken of by a couple of my guests. Okay,
so Maitreya. So Maitreya is one of these Antichrist type figures. He looks like the Jesus we've been given, but we really don't know what Jesus looks like. That's literally an idol that they've given us. That's why I've never had pictures of him and all that other stuff. I don't even wear crosses and stuff. I'm not into the idols and all that. This Christianity, you know, after Rome, it turned into something else. Well, it turned into Christianity. That's what they call it. But before that, it was just followers of Christ, you know, and I believe they had real mystical knowledge, and I think it was a whole different scene. And they were truly living, you know, following his ways. But then the Christianity came along, which kind of distorted everything. It's got us chasing Easter eggs. It's got us, you know, commercial culture and everything else, and it's unfortunate. I still count these as people as brothers and sisters, but some of the worst trolls I've had in my life have been religious Christians as well. So it's a very tricky area sometimes to walk, and you know what I'm saying? So there's that. Sorry, man, where were we going again? I just bounced around. I bet my head's bouncing around a lot always, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, we were talking about, you know, the contact with these entities. And
I had
asked you about if you think they're trying to prepare us for something with all this, you know, disclosure stuff that they're mentioning in the news.
Thanks, man. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've done a lot of videos on that subject. That they really are preparing us, I believe, to meet these things. I've shown how there's a massive increase in these sightings, but there's different kinds of UFOs too. The ones I'm focused on are the orbs. These are I believe, the interdimensional beings, because I've shown videos time and time again where they shapeshift, they change colors. Oftentimes they turn into literal diamonds floating around in the sky. Fascinating stuff, but I believe that's what these things are. As for other UFOs, I mean, you know, there's there's technology we don't know about. Of course, there's Area 51 where they have, aircraft that come out of there. I'm sure that, is top secret or whatever. I get that. That's a different kind of a UFO, but these are the liars and the deceivers is what I'm talking about. And people have had experiences of these things. I've shown even people in interviews, and people who weren't even religious realized that when they screamed out the name of Jesus, when these things came into their room, they would disappear. They'd go away. You can look into that. There's countless examples. And again, it's not just, so-called religious loons, coming up with that. It's just regular folk a lot of the time too. So, I believe these are wicked entities. Some may call them the Watchers or the fallen angels, but they've been here all along, but they're coming back lately a lot, and there's a lot of footage of these things popping out more and more. And they're putting on some amazing light shows, some amazing light shows. This could be a reflection symbolically of the war in heavens as well, as things are happening, heating up here on Earth. There's a really interesting video, another one that's really hard to find. It was a video of Obama, of aliens coming to the world, and it was a beautiful, glowing, weird-looking Pleiadian woman, a white woman, of course, like a bald white woman in a flowing white gown that was transparent. And, mystical lights all around her. And it was all her and Obama walking and stopping tanks and walking through the White House and in front of the Congress and the Senate. I mean, it was really creepy. And I was like, that could very well be how something like this works out. Again, I mean, these shape-shifting beings can come in any form. So what, they show up like whatever they want, whatever they think they can get away with. And they say, hey, we've been here with you forever. And the other thing too, the big part of this grand delusion is going to be destroying people who follow Christ. It really is. To me, ultimately, that's the goal. It'll destroy a lot of people who are weaker type Christians, if you will, are on the fence. They're easily going to fall off, I believe. It'll be like, well, none of this stuff is real. That's going to be the story. We created your religions to maintain humanity with this and that, but everything went crazy. Just is, again, some speculation, but this is the feeling I get. And also because we've been programmed with this. We've seen that scenario so many times before in movies and TV shows. And that's why when we're conditioned so much for certain things, when it happens in real life, there's not such a shock factor anymore. People don't even realize they've been waiting for this.
Right. Yeah, man, it's very interesting, fascinating and terrifying times we're in at the same time. And I wanted to get back to some of the agendas that we're seeing right now, especially with social media and the targeting of the youth through social media. I've seen firsthand through, my own experiences, the youth today is being affected by this in a very negative way. They're trying to, it seems, dumb us down, make the next generation weaker and less able to fight back. Are you seeing any of this?
I just did a video a few months ago called America's Place on the Fallen Empire's Timeline. And I went through history and I was showing how different empires have fallen. And there's always a handful of events that have to take place or that do take place right near the end. And that's one of them is softening up the men. You can look back to Rome, and in the beginning, their statues were these strong, statuesque warriors, right? Huge muscles ripping and, their armor on and swords. And at the end, they were kind of like almost transsexuals. They were very soft, feminine men. This is when homosexuality was running rampant through the culture back then as well. And homosexuality has been used time and time again to break these empires. It's just, I'm not just saying that. People can look it up for themselves, but this is a part of it. And you saw it play out perfectly in the statues in Rome. So we're seeing that happen in our culture now. I'm working on a video, but it takes this one's forever, man. But it's basically saying we're living in the movie Idiocracy. And I'm showing some examples of that. And one of the examples is,
man.
Oh, it's so true. And it's one of my favorite movies. But so on one hand, you've got the news saying they're putting boys in skirts in different schools right now. And then I got a news story saying they're putting girls in slacks in the other ones. So you have these examples of this madness. You look at what's happening. You talk about social media and the effect, like TikTok and stuff like that's the new big thing and all that. But, a lot of these stupid trends get started on TikTok and Snapchat, Instagram and all this. And it's where you got dum-dums running around children putting fargan Tide Pods in their mouth, and eating them. And now they're pulling out products and spitting in drinks and putting it back on the counter and licking ice cream.
Yes.
And right. And talking to social media, the danger is they're doing it for clicks, man. It's like, that's what matters the most, is just to get those clicks. They'll do anything. So we've seen even movies of that where people go out and do violent things and record it, just so they can get more clicks. I mean, is that the next step? Maybe, because I have a side hobby of watching these cringe videos. I love public freakout videos. I don't know if you ever watch those, but, just people recording. But there's also an incredibly darker side to it when I watch these sometimes, because it's like nobody helps anybody, like instead they all get their cameras out and you're watching some woman get her ass kicked or a guy get beat up, and they don't even care. They're just filming it. People are going, World Star, for World Star hip hop, and just,
yeah, man,
they're enjoying it. It's a good time.
Yeah. And, another aspect to this whole thing that we have to tie into this is basically our environment, our food, our water, our air. We're not fighting back. We don't care anymore. We're apathetic. And that's part of it. Everything that they're spraying in the air, putting in the food, and pumping through the media to us. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's exactly what I call, again, these are tentacles of that Lovecraftian beast that is the beast system. It's an antichrist system. I see it as, again, a hatred for humanity, and it works on many levels. So absolutely. High school teaches us to be a cog in the machine, having to wake up every day at a certain time, be in class, do the next thing. And it's something you don't really want to do, but you have to. And this teaches you to be a 9-to-5er, basically, just to be another cog in the machine. I know it's not for everybody. A lot of people rise up and do better. But for the majority of people, they ultimately become cogs in the machine. It's what they were taught from a very early age, And while all that's happening, I'm a man in my 40s, and I just had a heart attack last August. So it hadn't even been a year yet, man. I celebrate a year of heart attack next month, and I'm young. Everybody in there was flipping out because of how I look and the health I was in. And they said it had to be genetic, but I'm adopted, so I didn't know my history. But I have 2 stents. I mean, it was a serious heart attack, man. So, and 5 years ago, they diagnosed me as borderline type 2 diabetic. Now, through diet and exercise, I'm good now. I exercise every day, and I'm a vegetarian, except for a little bit of chicken here and there. So that's it. Good. Yeah, I changed my life. I dropped pant sizes. I look like a different guy, but I did that years ago. So the point, and I was in decent shape when I had the heart attack. The point is, I went through a whole thing with that as far as the medical system goes, that branch of the beast. They had me on like 8 or 10 different medications. After a couple of weeks, I'm waking up having suicidal ideas, which I've never, ever, ever had issues with anything like that. I was super depressed. And then being a researcher, I looked up these drugs, and sure enough, 4 of them caused all these symptoms. I couldn't win. I was on 4 of these things that had symptoms of causing suicidal ideation and depression. So I went through a whole process with the doctors. They even tried to put me on an antidepressant, which made me a zombie. So I quit that and started Kratom. So now I'm on a fully herbal regimen, except for just a couple things that are more or less blood thinners I have to take for the stents. So I changed everything, dude. I'm great now, but I'm saying I went through a few weeks of that war, and thank God I made through. The point is, though, think of all the millions of people that don't. There are tons of people stuck on all kinds of meds, not even really making them better. It's just prolonging their life so they can keep giving that company money.
Yeah, the whole medical mafia, it's all about money, and it's not about making anyone better. It's just about Band-Aids, and they make the profits, and everyone else will stay sick. And that's business for them, for everyone to stay sick.
Yeah, that's why there's a young lady named Erin Lewis who has, I can't remember the name of her website. I think it's Health Nut News is her website. And she's documented how all these holistic doctors, over 30 that I know of now, have come up missing or died in very mysterious circumstances over the last, it hadn't happened so much lately, but definitely a couple of years ago, there was a few-year run where they were all dying and coming up missing. And she was being gang stalked and even shown, like recorded, how she got home with a friend and somebody had been inside the house. The door was open. They didn't stay. They didn't steal anything, but somebody had been in there. And even the alarm or whatever had been tripped or something. So the point is, though, that that's a whole other subject, is gang stalking. But that's the kind of stuff apparently they do with gang stalking, is just mess with their minds. And they were doing that with Aaron at the time. So it's a very wicked system. It's trying to protect itself, and it wants us all to be stuck on the American medical system as opposed to what we had before this, which were the the medicine men and the mystics. They're people that knew naturally what God left on the earth for us to heal ourselves with. There's even grounding. I'm into grounding. Go outside with your shoes and socks off and stand on the ground for a good 15, 20 minutes a day, and get that natural healing energy from the earth. And that's not a hippie new agey thing. I believe God created the earth as that. This is a natural healing ability. And I think back to the Indians that maybe wore moccasins when it was cold, but a lot of the time we're running around barefoot all the time. A lot of other cultures run around barefoot and they don't suffer all the diseases we do. Think of all these people out in the middle of the Amazon.
Yeah, definitely, man. All this being said, what do you think the end game is? Do you think they're trying to, in a way, bring forth their own version of the end times? Do you think that's what's going on here?
Well, whether I've had other people ask me that, whether that's what they're doing or not, they're doing a darn good job of it. But see, there's also prophecies that have been unfolding that they couldn't have just created. So I believe, and also symbolically, there's so much I see that's leading us this way, which would be probably a whole other show. But now, I certainly believe we're in the beast system. I believe it's biblical. Again, guys, I'm not a preacher, pastor, or priest. I was real shy about coming out with my faith over the years. I didn't talk about it in all my early videos in the years before because I come from a humble background with religion and all that, and with faith. And again, I'm not a preacher. I don't know the Bible back and forth. And like I said, the trolling on YouTube from religious people through the years has just been absolutely vicious. I'm not saying all of them, because on the other hand, some of my best supporters and friends and encouragers are Christian people who are truly followers of Christ and just good spirits, man. But that's what it is. That's as time went on, even I started feeling guilty. I was like, I have to talk about my faith because I have to give people an answer, because I see a bunch of crazy answers out there people have for what's going on. And I don't think it's the truth. I believe it's a biblical truth. We're in the season of the end times. I don't know how long that's going to last or when anything's going to happen. But I do believe that we're waiting on the next event, which will be another 9/11, but it's going to be much worse this time. We're waiting on World War III as well, which may trigger that after the event. Part of that event, a lot of people, myself included, are watching New York City. There's a lot of prophecy about it being hit by a tsunami after a nuclear attack. Look at St. John's Pillars in New York City. Has been there forever. And they literally have New York City being wiped out by that tsunami. And I didn't even know about that before I saw the other stuff about New York getting hit. So it also shows the birth of the Antichrist on St. John's Pillars. So it gets deep. I've done a lot of decoding on that one. So yeah, man, that's where I'm at. That's what I believe is that, it's all about Jesus Christ. It's all about God. It's not about religion or dogma or hatred of, gays and blacks and browns and sinners and whatever it is. It's not about that. It really is about love, but through that filter of God, through Christ. The Antichrist system is here. We're watching it being built before our very eyes. It's not fully matured yet. I believe once the event happens and the Antichrist is revealed, everything's going to be locked into place. That's my thoughts, honestly.
Okay, well, now that also being said, what do you see happening in our future? Do you think this transhuman agenda is going to take off and get to where we can't control it anymore? The youth will be out of our hands. Or do we have a chance of turning all this around and somehow getting our freedom back as humans?
Okay, so on that note, there's even in the Bible, there's times that things were restrained because the people turned from the wrong things and started working together to change things. So I do believe as humanity that we could change things. I still believe prophecy is there and it has to play out, but perhaps there can be restrainers. A lot of people think that Trump, regardless of right-left stuff or who's working with the Illuminati or whatever it is, but a lot of people think that Trump was placed there as a restrainer as well. There's a lot of symbolism with him and King Cyrus, who freed the Jews, right, many years ago from the Egyptians, I believe. So, so it's very interesting how this symbolically plays out. There's also a couple of ancient architecture out there from like thousands of years ago that have images that look exactly like Trump on there. That's another interesting thing. So a lot of people think that. So my thing is this, is that that is the big question. Do we keep trying to fight the system in different ways by doing this or doing that or talking to our council people and all that? Absolutely. Yeah, because we can restrain some of this stuff ourselves. We can slow this system down ourselves. Absolutely. As humanity, we should, but I don't think that's the ultimate end goal. I think the end goal is it's all spiritual, and again, my take is more from a Christian perspective, and that's the way I see it, and it wasn't just because I was born in church. I couldn't stand that church. I was little. I left when I was young, and all my life through the military, I would go to different churches by myself. I was even in a cult in Maui, Hawaii for a few months. That's a long story there, but no mind control took place, but at least on me, it seemed like everybody else was. So I've had my experiences with religion. I walked away from it. I still don't appreciate religion, but I love people talking about God, the Word, and Christ and everything else. And that's, again, I don't have another answer. That's really, to me, that's kind of like the ultimate end goal for us as humanity, is to make sure you're prepared spiritually for what's happening and what's coming. And just for a humanitarian type level, yeah, let's keep fighting. I'm doing it with my videos too, trying to show the light, right? Trying to break down this stuff and show people what's going on. You do your work in it too. So, yeah, let's keep fighting. I'm with that. Both.
Yeah, man. Definitely. Very well said. I agree with you 100%. We got to keep fighting. We got to do whatever little we can do to do our part and to try and change this beast system that we live in. And KJ, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on tonight. That was fantastic information, and I'll definitely have to have you back on.
Chris, thanks, man. It was a real pleasure. I'm sorry it took us so long, but it sure was worth it. And you're a great guy, man, and thanks a lot to your audience. Y'all take care.
All right, you have a good night.
Okay, see you later.